The wrench slipped from my greasy fingers and clattered against the concrete floor of my garage. Not because I was clumsy, hell, I'd been fixing engines since I was 12, but because my wife Dana's voice was coming through the kitchen window, crystal clear and sharp as a blade. God, Jake is so pathetic, she laughed into her phone. Still thinks we're some happy little family. The poor bastard has no idea. I froze under the hood of my pickup, oil staining my work shirt, listening to my wife of 18 years tear me apart like I was some stranger she'd never shared a bed with. The autumn air in Lakeview carried sound funny sometimes, especially when the wind died down like it had that Tuesday evening. No, Troy, he doesn't suspect anything. How could he? Look at him, grease under his fingernails, drives that piece of shit truck, thinks a fancy dinner is Applebee's on our anniversary. My hands clenched into fists. Troy. I knew that name. Troy Brennan, the slick-haired car dealer who ran the Ford lot on Main Street. The guy who wore $1,000 suits to sell 100,000-mile trucks to suckers who couldn't afford better. When are you going to tell him about us? Troy's voice was tinny through the speakerphone, but I caught every word. Soon. I'm just waiting for the right moment. Maybe after I make partner at the firm. Then I won't need his pathetic little electrical business to keep me comfortable. The kitchen door slammed, and 17-year-old Kayla stormed into the garage, her phone clutched in her manicured hand like a weapon. My daughter had Dana's sharp features and my stubborn streak, a dangerous combination that usually spelled trouble. Dad, Mom wants to talk to you about something important, she said, not looking up from her screen. Something about seeing other people but keeping the house for family stability. Don't be a total loser about it, okay? Just say yes, so we can all move on with our lives. I stared at my daughter, my own flesh and bone, delivering this news as if she were asking me to grab milk from the store. When had she become so detached? When had I become such a joke in my own family? Is that what your mother told you to say? I asked, wiping my hands on an old rag. Kayla finally looked up, rolling her eyes with the practiced disdain only teenagers could master. She didn't have to tell me anything. Everyone at school knows you two are basically roommates. At least this way she'll be happy, and maybe you can find someone more... your speed. My speed? You know, someone who thinks Buffalo Wild Wings is fancy and doesn't mind dating a guy who smells like motor oil. The words hit harder than any punch I'd ever taken at Big Mike's boxing gym. This was my daughter, the little girl I'd taught to ride a bike, who used to fall asleep on my chest watching Saturday morning cartoons. Now she was looking at me like I was some embarrassing relative she had to tolerate at family gatherings. Tell your mother I'll be in shortly, I said quietly. Kayla shrugged and headed back toward the house, already typing on her phone, probably updating her TikTok followers about her loser dad's latest humiliation. I stood alone in the garage, surrounded by the tools and projects that had been my sanctuary for years. The place where I'd built my small electrical business from nothing, where I'd taught myself everything from basic wiring to complex industrial systems. Dana used to be proud of my work ethic, back when we were young and broke and actually talked to each other about things that mattered. Now I was just the guy who paid the bills while she played lawyer and screwed car dealers. The kitchen door opened again, and Dana appeared in the doorway. At 41, she was still beautiful in that cold, professional way that intimidated opposing counsel and made restaurant hostesses seat us at better tables. Her dark hair was pulled back in a perfect bun, her gray suit was wrinkle-free despite a long day at the law office, and her expression was the same one she wore when negotiating contracts. Jake, we need to talk. So I heard. She stepped into the garage, careful not to let her heels touch any of the oil stains. I think it's time we were honest about what our marriage has become. What has it become, Dana? A business arrangement. We're good co-parents, we maintain a nice home, we look respectable in public, but we both know the romance died years ago. I leaned against my workbench, studying her face for any sign of the woman I'd fallen in love with in college. She'd been different then, ambitious but warm, driven but not ruthless. Somewhere along the way, success had frozen her heart solid. So what are you proposing? An open marriage. We keep the house, we co-parent Kayla, we maintain our social standing, but we're free to pursue other relationships. Other relationships like Troy Brennan? Her poker face slipped for just a second, a tiny flinch around her eyes that told me everything I needed to know. I don't know what you're talking about. Sure you don't. We stared at each other across the garage, 18 years of marriage reduced to a standoff between strangers. Finally, Dana straightened her shoulders and delivered her ultimatum with the same tone she used to crush witnesses on the stand. This is happening, Jake. The only question is whether you're going to be mature about it or make things difficult for everyone. I thought about the conversation I'd overheard, about my daughter's casual cruelty, about the way Dana's friends looked at me at parties, like I was some blue-collar charity case she'd outgrown. For 18 years, I'd played the role of the grateful husband, the guy who'd won the lottery by landing a woman like Dana Martinez. But gratitude had an expiration date, and mine had just run out. You know what, Dana? You're absolutely right. She blinked, clearly expecting more of a fight. I am? We should both be free to pursue what makes us happy. No more pretending, no more fake smiles at dinner parties. Complete honesty from now on. Good. I'm glad you're being reasonable about this. Oh, I'm going to be very reasonable. Something in my tone made her take a step back. What does that mean? It means if you want complete freedom, you'll have it. Starting tonight. I walked past her toward the house, leaving her standing in the garage with a confused expression on her perfectly made-up face. She had no idea what she'd just unleashed. For 18 years, I'd been the reliable one, the steady provider, the guy who fixed things when they broke. Now it was time to break a few things of my own. The next morning, Dana discovered the first consequence of her newfound freedom when her credit card was declined at her usual coffee shop. I was already at work, rewiring the electrical system in the old Hendricks warehouse, when my phone started buzzing with increasingly frantic texts. Jake, there's something wrong with my card. The bank says you froze our accounts? Call me now. I ignored them all and focused on my work. Electrical systems were honest. You connected the right wires, power flowed where it was supposed to go. Connect the wrong ones, and everything went dark. It was a lesson Dana was about to learn the hard way. She was waiting for me when I got home that evening, pacing the kitchen like a caged animal. Still in her work clothes, but her perfect composure had developed some cracks. What the hell did you do to our accounts? Our accounts? I opened the refrigerator and grabbed a beer. Funny thing about that, turns out most of them are actually my accounts. You know, since I'm the one who's been paying the bills for 18 years while you were building your career. You can't just cut off my access to money. Sure I can. You wanted freedom, remember? Well, freedom means taking responsibility for your own expenses. I'm sure Troy won't mind picking up the tab for your fancy coffee and designer lunches. Dana's face flushed red. This is financial abuse. No, this is financial reality. You want to see other people? Great, but you'll do it on your own dime. What about Kayla? Kayla needs to learn that actions have consequences. Like telling her father he's a loser who should just roll over and accept being cheated on. I took a long sip of beer and watched Dana process this new reality. She was used to having all the power in our relationship. The higher income, the social status, the implied threat that she could do better than me if she wanted to. But I'd been quietly building my business for years, and it turned out I had more leverage than either of us had realized. You're being ridiculous, she said, but her voice had lost its edge. Am I? You made it pretty clear that I'm just some blue-collar embarrassment you've outgrown. So why would you want my money? It's not about the money. It's always about the money, Dana. You think I didn't notice how you started looking at me differently after you made senior associate? How you stopped introducing me as your husband and started calling me Jake at parties, like I was just some guy you happened to know. She opened her mouth to deny it, then closed it again. We both knew I was right. Look, she said, switching to her reasonable attorney voice. Maybe we moved too fast on this. Maybe we should try counseling first. Counseling? I laughed, and it wasn't a pleasant sound. You mean like the counseling I suggested 3 years ago when you started working late every night? Or the counseling I mentioned 2 years ago when you stopped wearing your wedding ring because it got in the way at work? That's not... Or maybe the counseling I begged for last year when you moved into the guest bedroom because my snoring was disruptive to your sleep schedule? Each word was a nail in the coffin of our marriage, and we both knew it. But Dana was a fighter, and she wasn't going down without throwing some punches of her own. Fine. You want to play games? I'll call Miranda. She's got plenty of connections in this town. Let's see how your little electrical business does when word gets out about what kind of man you really are. Miranda Walsh. Dana's best friend since law school, the queen bee of Lakeview's social scene, and the most vindictive woman I'd ever met. She ran the biggest real estate office in town and had her manicured fingers in every piece of gossip that mattered. Go ahead, I said. Call Miranda. I'm sure she'll have lots of helpful advice about marriage. Something in my tone made Dana pause. What's that supposed to mean? Nothing. Just that Miranda's always been such a good friend to our marriage. The truth was, I'd started paying attention to things I'd ignored for years, like how Miranda always seemed to know about Dana's work schedule before I did, how she was always encouraging Dana to pursue her dreams and not settle for less than she deserved, how she'd been the one to suggest Dana start working late at the office, claiming it would help her make partner faster. Miranda Walsh had been poisoning my marriage for years, and I was just now realizing how deep the infection went. I'm going to stay at Miranda's tonight, Dana announced, to give us both some space to think. Good idea. I'm sure she's got the guest room all ready for you. Dana grabbed her purse and headed for the door, then turned back one last time. This doesn't have to be ugly, Jake. We can still handle this like adults. You're absolutely right. We should both be completely honest from now on. No more secrets, no more lies, just the truth. She nodded and left, probably thinking she'd won some kind of victory. Poor Dana. She had no idea that the truth was about to become her worst enemy. After she was gone, I sat in my kitchen and made a list of everything I knew and everything I needed to find out. Dana thought she was playing chess while I was playing checkers, but she'd made one crucial mistake. She'd forgotten that I was the guy who fixed things when they broke, and right now, my life was broken in ways that required some very specific repairs. The first item on my list was simple: find out exactly how long Dana and Troy had been screwing around behind my back. The second item was more complex: figure out what role Miranda Walsh had played in destroying my marriage. The third item was the most important of all: make sure everyone in Lakeview understood exactly what kind of people they were dealing with. I finished my beer and got to work. Lakeview was the kind of town where everybody knew everybody else's business, which made it perfect for gathering intelligence if you knew where to look. I started with Smokey's Bar, the dive joint on Main Street where the blue-collar crowd went to complain about their lives and gossip about everyone else's. Big Mike was already there when I walked in Thursday night, nursing his usual whiskey and complaining to anyone who'd listen about the sorry state of modern boxing. Mike had trained fighters back when the sport meant something, and now he ran a gym that was more therapy session than athletic facility. "Jake," he called out when he saw me. "Heard you and the missus are having some troubles." News travels fast. Faster than you'd think. Buy me a drink and I'll tell you what people are saying. I ordered 2 whiskeys and settled in for an education. In a small town, bartenders were better than private investigators, and Smokey had been serving drinks and collecting secrets for 30 years. "Your wife's been in here twice this week," Smokey said, wiping down glasses with practiced efficiency. "Both times with that real estate lady, Miranda." They were talking pretty loud after a few drinks. What kind of talking? The kind where they thought nobody was listening. Something about how you'd finally gotten the message and how it was time to move to the next phase. Big Mike leaned closer. "Next phase of what?" "That's what I'd like to know," I said. Smokey glanced around the bar, then lowered his voice. "They also mentioned something about Troy Brennan. Seemed like Miranda was giving your wife advice about how to handle him." "Handle him how?" "Couldn't catch all of it, but Miranda kept saying something about keeping him motivated and making sure he doesn't get cold feet." I sipped my whiskey and processed this information. It sounded like Miranda wasn't just supporting Dana's affair, she was actively managing it. But why? What did she get out of destroying my marriage? "There's something else," Smokey continued. "Troy's been bragging to anyone who'll listen about his new girlfriend. Says she's classy, educated, way out of his league. Real proud of himself for landing a lawyer." "Has he mentioned her name?" "Not directly, but he's been flashing around pictures on his phone. Pretty brunette, looks familiar." My hands tightened around my glass. The idea of Troy showing off pictures of my wife like some trophy he'd won made my stomach turn. "You want some advice?" Big Mike asked. "From someone who's seen his share of fights?" "I'm listening." "Don't go after Troy first. He's just the weapon. Go after whoever's holding the gun. Smart advice. Troy was a sleazy opportunist, but he wasn't the mastermind here. Someone else was pulling the strings, and I had a pretty good idea who it was. The next morning, I decided to do some field research. Miranda's real estate office was in the nicest part of downtown. All glass and chrome and expensive furniture designed to intimidate buyers into paying more than they could afford. I parked across the street and watched the comings and goings for an hour. Miranda arrived at 9:30 in a silver BMW, dressed like she was heading to a board meeting instead of showing houses to middle-class families. She was followed 20 minutes later by Dana, who parked in the space marked "Reserved for M. Walsh." Interesting. Dana was supposed to be at her law office by 9, but instead she was having secret meetings with her best friend. I waited another hour, taking pictures with my phone and making notes about who went in and out of the building. At 11:15, Troy Brennan's red Corvette pulled up. He went inside for exactly 37 minutes, then came out looking like he'd just won the lottery. Whatever they'd discussed in there, it had made him very happy. I followed him back to his dealership and watched him for another hour. Troy was the kind of guy who'd peaked in high school and never gotten over it, still wearing his Letterman jacket at 42, still talking about the touchdown pass that won the homecoming game in 1998. He was handsome in a generic way, with the kind of smile that worked on lonely housewives and divorced women looking for excitement. But he wasn't smart enough to orchestrate something like this on his own. He was a foot soldier, not a general. That evening, I drove past Miranda's house, a sprawling colonial in the most expensive neighborhood in Lakeview. Dana's car was in the driveway, along with two others I didn't recognize. Through the front window, I could see several women sitting around Miranda's dining room table, wine glasses in hand, looking like they were having the time of their lives. I parked down the street and called the house from my cell phone. "Walsh residence," Miranda answered in her fake sweet voice. "Hi, this is Jake Barnes. Is Dana there? Her office said she might be at your place." "Oh, Jake. How are you holding up, sweetie? Dana mentioned you two were going through a rough patch." "We're working through it. Can I talk to her?" "She's in the bathroom right now, but I'll have her call you back." "Actually, I'll just swing by and pick her up. We have dinner reservations." "Oh, that's not necessary." "I insist. See you in 5 minutes." I hung up and drove to the house, curious to see how they'd handle this surprise visit. Through the window, I watched Miranda frantically gesturing to the other women, who quickly gathered their purses and headed for the back door. By the time I rang the doorbell, it was just Miranda and Dana sitting in the living room, trying to look casual. "Jake?" Miranda exclaimed, opening the door with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "What a nice surprise. I thought I'd take my wife out for a nice dinner. You know, work on our marriage like mature adults." Dana appeared behind Miranda, looking flustered. "I thought we agreed to take some space." "I changed my mind. I realized how much I miss spending time with you." The two women exchanged a look that confirmed everything I'd suspected. This wasn't just about Dana wanting freedom. This was a coordinated campaign to end our marriage, and Miranda was the field commander. "Well, isn't that sweet?" Miranda said. "Dana, you should go. It sounds like Jake is really trying to make an effort." "Actually," I said, "I was hoping to talk to both of you." "Miranda, you've been such a good friend to Dana over the years. I'd love to get your advice about how to save our marriage." Miranda's smile flickered. "I'm not sure that's appropriate." "Of course it is. You know Dana better than anyone. You've been helping her figure out what she really wants, right?" "I just want her to be happy." "We all do." "That's why I think we should be completely honest with each other. No more secrets, no more games. Just the truth." I looked directly at Miranda when I said this, and for just a moment, her mask slipped. I saw something cold and calculating behind her eyes, something that had nothing to do with friendship and everything to do with revenge. "You know what?" Dana said quickly. "I think I will go to dinner with Jake. We do need to talk." "Great," I said. "Miranda, thanks for being such a good friend to my wife. I'm sure she'll tell you all about our conversation later." As we walked to my truck, I could feel Miranda watching us from her front window. She was probably already planning her next move, figuring out how to counter this unexpected development. But I had news for Miranda Walsh. I was done being the clueless husband who didn't see what was happening in his own marriage. From now on, I was going to be several moves ahead of everyone else. And the first move was going to be a real surprise. The restaurant I chose was Vincenzo's, the fanciest place in Lakeview, the kind of establishment where Dana liked to be seen when she wanted to impress clients or intimidate opponents. But tonight, it was going to serve a different purpose. We were seated at a corner table with perfect acoustics, where conversations carried just far enough to be overheard by nearby diners. Dana ordered her usual, salmon with risotto and a glass of expensive Chardonnay. I stuck with the steak and a beer. "This is nice," she said, clearly trying to figure out my angle. "I wasn't expecting..." "Expecting what? For your husband to want to have dinner with you?" "Expecting you to be so calm about everything." I cut into my steak and took a bite, letting the silence stretch between us. Around us, I could see familiar faces. People from Dana's law firm, clients from my electrical business, neighbors who'd known us for years. Perfect. "I've been doing some thinking," I said finally. "About what you said. About being honest." "Good. Honesty is important." "It really is." "So let me start by being completely honest with you." Dana tensed, probably sensing that this conversation wasn't going to go the way she'd expected. "I know about Troy." Her face went pale, but she tried to maintain her composure. "Jake, I know about the motel receipts on your credit card, the one you thought I couldn't access because you changed the password." "I can explain. I know about the text messages, the ones where you called me pathetic and clueless, the ones where you laughed about how easy it was to fool me." By now, our conversation was starting to attract attention from nearby tables. Dana noticed and lowered her voice. "Can we please discuss this at home?" "Why? Aren't you proud of your relationship with Troy? Isn't this what you wanted? Complete honesty?" "You're making a scene. I'm just being honest. Like you've been honest with Miranda about your plans to divorce me once you make partner." Dana's eyes widened. She hadn't expected me to know about that conversation. "Like you've been honest about using our daughter to deliver your ultimatums because you were too cowardly to face me yourself." "That's not..." Like you've been honest about letting Miranda orchestrate this whole thing because you needed someone else to do your dirty work. Miranda has nothing to do with this. Really? Then why has she been paying for Troy's hotel rooms? The question hit Dana like a physical blow. She stared at me across the table, her mouth opening and closing without sound. That's right, I continued. I did some digging. Miranda's been bankrolling your affair from the beginning. Hotel rooms, fancy dinners, even that weekend trip to Chicago you told me was a legal conference. How did you? I'm not as stupid as you think I am, Dana. I know how to follow a paper trail. The question is, why would your best friend spend thousands of dollars to help you cheat on your husband? Dana looked around the restaurant, clearly realizing that half the town was now listening to our conversation. Her professional reputation was being destroyed one word at a time, and there was nothing she could do to stop it. Jake, please. Can we go home and talk about this privately? I think we've had enough private conversations, don't you? Besides, I thought you wanted everyone to know about your new lifestyle. Isn't that what open marriage means? I signaled the waiter for another beer and leaned back in my chair, enjoying the show. Dana was trapped. She couldn't leave without making an even bigger scene, but staying meant enduring more public humiliation. You want to know what I think? I said, loud enough for the neighboring tables to hear clearly. I think Miranda has been planning this for years. I think she's been filling your head with poison about our marriage, convincing you that you deserve better, that I'm holding you back. That's not true. I think she's been using you to get back at me for something, and you've been too blind to see it. Get back at you for what? I smiled and took a sip of my beer. That's between me and Miranda. But don't worry. I'm sure she'll explain everything once she realizes her little plan has fallen apart. Dana stood up abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. I'm not listening to any more of this. Sit down, Dana. No, I'm going home. To whose home? Mine? Because last I checked, you wanted complete freedom, and free people pay their own rent. She stared at me for a long moment, probably calculating whether she had enough money in her personal account to afford her own place. The answer was no. Dana had always been terrible with money, assuming I'd always be there to cover her expenses. This isn't over, she said quietly. You're absolutely right. It's just getting started. She walked out of the restaurant with as much dignity as she could muster, leaving me alone at the table with an audience of fascinated neighbors. I finished my steak slowly, nodding politely to the people who kept glancing in my direction. When I finally left Vincenzo's, I knew the story would be all over town by morning. Poor Jake Barnes, the cuckolded husband who'd finally grown a spine. Dana Martinez, the hotshot lawyer who'd been caught cheating with a car salesman. Miranda Walsh, the puppet master who'd been pulling strings behind the scenes. But that was just the opening act. The real show was about to begin. I drove home to find Kayla waiting in the living room, her phone clutched in her hand like a weapon. She'd clearly been crying, but she was trying to hide it behind a mask of teenage anger. Everyone at school is talking about you and Mom, she said without looking up. What are they saying? That you humiliated her in front of the whole town? That you're some kind of psycho who can't handle rejection? Is that what you think? She finally looked at me, and I saw something I hadn't seen in years. Uncertainty. For the first time since this whole mess started, Kayla wasn't sure who the villain was. I think you're both acting like children. Maybe. But only one of us has been lying for months. She wasn't lying. She told you she wanted to see other people. After she'd already been seeing other people for 6 months? That's not honesty, Kayla. That's just getting caught. My daughter stared at me for a long moment, processing this information. She was smart, smarter than either Dana or I gave her credit for, and she was starting to connect the dots. How long have you known? Long enough? Why didn't you say anything? Because I wanted to see how far she'd go, how many people she'd involve, how much damage she was willing to do to our family for a fling with a car salesman. Kayla's phone buzzed with a text message. She glanced at it and frowned. Mom wants me to come stay at Miranda's house. Do you want to? I don't know. Everything's so messed up. I sat down next to her on the couch, careful not to invade her space. Kayla, I need you to understand something. Whatever happens between your mother and me, you're not responsible for fixing it. You're 17 years old. You should be worried about homework and boys and college applications, not your parents' marriage. But everyone at school will find something new to gossip about next week. But you'll still be my daughter, and I'll still love you no matter what. She leaned against my shoulder for the first time in months, and for a moment she was my little girl again instead of Dana's weaponized teenager. Dad, are you going to divorce Mom? I don't know yet. But I'm not going to let her keep treating me like I'm disposable. What does that mean? I thought about Miranda's cold eyes, about Troy's smug grin, about Dana's casual cruelty. They'd all made the same mistake. They'd assumed I was weak because I was patient, that I was stupid because I was kind. It was time to show them how wrong they were. The next morning, I woke up to 17 missed calls and 43 text messages. Word of the restaurant confrontation had spread through Lakeview like wildfire, and everyone wanted to know what was going to happen next. Most of the messages were from clients, asking if the drama would affect my work. A few were from old friends offering support, but the most interesting one came from an unknown number at 6:30 in the morning. "This is Tom Bradley from Channel 7 News. We'd like to interview you about your situation. Call me, local news." Perfect. I deleted the message and got dressed for work, but my mind was already working on the next phase of my plan. At the job site, a new office complex that needed complete electrical renovation, my crew was buzzing with gossip. Most of them had heard about the restaurant scene, and they were looking at me with a mixture of sympathy and curiosity. "Boss," said Danny, my best electrician, "you okay? You need anything? I need you guys to focus on work. This personal stuff doesn't belong on the job site." "Sure thing. But if you need backup, you know we got your back." That was the thing about blue-collar loyalty. It was earned through years of fair treatment and honest work, not bought with fancy dinners and false promises. These guys had seen me build my business from nothing, had watched me treat them with respect when other contractors treated their workers like disposable tools. Around lunchtime, my phone rang. Miranda Walsh. "Jake, we need to talk." "Do we? This has gone far enough. You're hurting people who don't deserve it. People like you? People like Kayla. She's caught in the middle of this mess because you can't handle the fact that your marriage is over." I walked away from the job site, out of earshot of my crew. "My marriage is over because you wanted it to be over. The question is why?" "I have no idea what you're talking about." "Sure you don't. Tell me, Miranda, how long have you been planning this? Did you start working on Dana right after I fired you, or did you wait a few years for the perfect opportunity?" The silence on the other end of the line was all the confirmation I needed. 5 years ago, Miranda had worked for me as an office manager. She'd been good at the job, organized, efficient, professional. But she'd also been stealing from me, skimming money from client payments and covering her tracks with false invoices and creative bookkeeping. When I caught her, I'd given her a choice: pay back what she'd stolen and leave quietly, or face criminal charges. She'd chosen option 1, but she'd never forgiven me for discovering her theft. In Miranda's mind, I'd humiliated her and destroyed her reputation, so she'd spent 5 years plotting her revenge. "You can't prove anything," she said finally. "I don't have to prove anything. I just have to ask the right questions in the right places. Like why you've been paying Troy's expenses. Like why you encourage Dana to work late nights at the office. Like why you've been spreading rumors about my drinking problem. The drinking problem I don't actually have. You're paranoid. Am I? Or am I finally paying attention to what's been happening in my own life? Jake, listen to me. Dana doesn't love you anymore. She hasn't for years. I didn't make that happen. I just helped her realize it. By introducing her to Troy? By showing her that she deserved better than a life of mediocrity with a man who has no ambition. There it was. The truth, finally out in the open. Miranda hadn't just been supporting Dana's affair. She'd been orchestrating it from the beginning, finding the right man to tempt her with, creating opportunities for them to meet, funding their relationship until it became serious enough to destroy my marriage. "You know what the funny thing is?" I said. "Dana actually did deserve better. She deserved a husband who paid attention to what was happening in his own house. She deserved a friend who cared more about her happiness than settling old scores. This isn't about revenge. Everything's about revenge, Miranda. The question is whether you're smart enough to see what's coming next." I hung up and went back to work, but my mind was racing. Miranda had just confirmed everything I'd suspected, and she'd given me the ammunition I needed for the next phase of my plan. That evening, I drove to Big Mike's gym and spent 2 hours beating the hell out of a heavy bag. The physical exertion helped clear my head and focus my thoughts. When I was done, Mike handed me a towel and a bottle of water. "Feel better?" "Getting there." "You know, I've been thinking about what you told me, about your wife and her friend." "Yeah?" "I used to know Miranda Walsh back when she was Miranda Collins, before she married that real estate developer." I stopped toweling off my face. What kind of knowing? The kind where she tried to get me to invest in some property deal that turned out to be complete bullshit. Cost me $15,000 before I figured out what was happening. She scammed you? She scammed half the guys in this gym. Always had some get-rich-quick scheme, some inside deal that was too good to pass up. Most of us were too embarrassed to talk about it afterwards. This was news to me. I'd known Miranda was vindictive, but I hadn't realized she was a serial con artist. How long ago was this? 7, 8 years, maybe. Right around the time she started her real estate business. The timeline fit perfectly. Miranda had been running scams to fund her new career, just like she'd been skimming money from my business. When I'd caught her stealing, I'd probably ruined one of her income streams and forced her to find new victims. Mike, I need you to do me a favor. Name it. I need you to talk to some of the other guys she ripped off. See if they'd be willing to share their stories with the right people. You thinking about going to the cops? I'm thinking about going to someone who can do more damage than the cops. The next morning, I made a call to Tom Bradley at Channel 7. News. Mr. Bradley? This is Jake Barnes. I understand you wanted to talk to me about my situation. Mr. Barnes. Yes, absolutely. When can we meet? How about this afternoon? But I should warn you. This story is bigger than just a cheating wife and a bitter husband. How much bigger? I thought about Miranda's web of lies and manipulation, about all the people she'd hurt over the years, about the elaborate scheme she'd constructed to destroy my marriage, big enough to take down one of the most prominent businesswomen in Lakeview. I'll be there in an hour. Tom Bradley turned out to be a sharp young reporter with an eye for detail and a nose for corruption. He arrived at my house with a camera crew and a list of questions that told me he'd already done his homework. Mr. Barnes, let's start with the basics. How long have you been married? 18 years. We met in college, got married right after Dana passed the bar exam. And when did you first suspect your wife was having an affair? I walked him through the timeline, the late nights at work, the mysterious expenses, the changes in Dana's behavior, but I also made sure to emphasize the role Miranda had played in orchestrating everything. So, you believe Mrs. Walsh was actively encouraging this affair? I believe Mrs. Walsh has been planning this for years, ever since I caught her embezzling from my business and fired her. Bradley's eyebrows went up. Embezzling? Do you have proof of that? I handed him a folder full of documents, bank records, invoices, canceled checks, everything I'd kept from Miranda's employment with my company, including the signed confession and repayment agreement she'd given me to avoid criminal charges. This is explosive, Bradley said, flipping through the papers. Have you shared this with anyone else? Not yet. But I've got more. Over the next 2 hours, I laid out everything I'd discovered about Miranda's operation. The fake property deals that had bilked money from local investors. The rumors and gossip she'd spread to damage her enemies. The way she'd manipulated Dana into believing her marriage was worthless. We'll need to verify all of this independently, Bradley said. But if even half of what you're telling me is true, this is the biggest story I've covered in 5 years. There's one more thing. I think Miranda's been running some kind of real estate scam. Buying properties through shell companies, inflating their values, then selling them to unsuspecting buyers at huge markups. That's a serious accusation. It's a serious crime, and I think I know how to prove it. That evening, I got a call from Dana. She sounded exhausted and defeated. Jake, we need to talk. Really talk this time. I'm listening. Can you come to Miranda's house? There are some things I need to tell you. What kind of things? Things I should have told you months ago. I found Dana sitting alone in Miranda's living room, looking smaller and more fragile than I'd seen her in years. Her perfect professional facade had cracked, revealing the scared woman underneath. Where's Miranda? She had to go out of town suddenly. Some kind of business emergency. I'll bet she did. Word was probably getting around that a news crew had been asking questions about her business practices. Dana, what's going on? She looked up at me with tears in her eyes. I think I've been played. What do you mean? Miranda's been lying to me about a lot of things. Over the next hour, Dana told me everything. How Miranda had been the one to introduce her to Troy at a charity event. How Miranda had convinced her that I was having an affair with one of my clients. A complete fabrication designed to make Dana feel justified in cheating. How Miranda had been paying for hotel rooms and dinners, claiming she wanted to help Dana find happiness. She told me you were planning to leave me, Dana said. She showed me fake bank records that made it look like you were hiding money, preparing for a divorce. And you believed her? She's been my best friend for 15 years. Why wouldn't I believe her? Because she's a sociopath who's been using you to get revenge on me? Dana stared at me in shock. Revenge for what? I told her about Miranda's embezzlement, about the other people she'd scammed, about the elaborate web of lies she'd constructed to destroy our marriage. She's been planning this for 5 years, Dana. You were just the weapon she chose to use against me. But why? Why go to all this trouble? Because in Miranda's mind, I humiliated her. I caught her stealing, I fired her, and I made her pay back the money. She couldn't let that go. Dana buried her face in her hands. Oh God, what have I done? You trusted the wrong person. We both did. Jake, I'm so sorry. I know that doesn't fix anything, but I need you to know. I know. We sat in silence for a long moment, 18 years of marriage hanging in the balance. Finally, Dana looked up at me. Is there any way we can fix this? I don't know. You didn't just have an affair, Dana. You let someone else destroy our family for their own sick purposes. You turned our daughter against me. You humiliated me in front of the entire town. I know. I know I screwed up everything. The question is, what are you going to do about it? What do you mean? Miranda's not done yet. She's going to try to pin all of this on you and Troy, make herself look like the innocent friend who was just trying to help. Are you going to let her get away with that? Dana straightened up, and for the first time in months, I saw a flash of the strong woman I'd married. No, I'm not. Good. Because tomorrow morning, Channel 7 News is going to run a story about Miranda's business practices, and they're going to want to interview everyone who's been affected by her schemes. Including me? Especially you. The question is, are you ready to tell the truth about what really happened? Dana nodded slowly. Yes, I am. The Channel 7 news story aired at 6 o'clock on Friday evening, and it was everything I'd hoped for and more. Tom Bradley had done his homework, tracking down a dozen people who'd been victimized by Miranda's various schemes over the years. The embezzlement from my business was just the beginning. Miranda had been running fake investment opportunities, inflating property values, and manipulating clients for nearly a decade. The total damage was estimated at over $2 million. But the most devastating part of the story was Dana's interview. Sitting in front of the camera in her best professional suit, Dana laid out the entire conspiracy in calm, precise legal language. How Miranda had manipulated her into believing I was unfaithful. How Miranda had introduced her to Troy and encouraged the affair. How Miranda had been funding the relationship while pretending to be a concerned friend. I realize now that I was being used, Dana said, looking directly into the camera. Mrs. Walsh exploited my insecurities and my trust to destroy my marriage as part of an elaborate revenge scheme against my husband. The story ended with a shot of Miranda's empty real estate office and a note that she was unavailable for comment. Word around town was that she'd fled to her sister's house in Florida, leaving behind a mountain of debt and a dozen pending lawsuits. My phone started ringing before the story was even over. The first call was from Kayla, who was at a friend's house watching the news. Dad, is all that stuff about Miranda true? Every word of it. And Mom really didn't know? Your mother made some bad choices, but she was being manipulated by someone she trusted. That doesn't excuse what she did, but it explains it. Are you guys going to get divorced? I don't know yet, sweetheart. We're still figuring things out. The second call was from Big Mike. Holy shit, Jake. Did you see the news? I saw it. Miranda Walsh is finished in this town. Nobody's going to do business with her again. Good. What about Dana? You two going to work things out? We'll see. The third call was from Troy Brennan, and he sounded panicked. Jake, we need to talk. This whole thing has gotten out of hand. Has it? Look, I never meant for any of this to happen. Miranda told me you and Dana were already separated, that you were okay with her seeing other people. And you believed her? She showed me text messages from Dana saying you'd agreed to an open marriage. I thought I was just helping a lonely woman get back into dating. I almost felt sorry for him. Almost. Troy was a sleaze, but he was a stupid sleaze who'd been played just as badly as Dana had been. What do you want from me, Troy? I want to make this right. I'll do whatever you want, public apology, pay for counseling, whatever it takes. It's not up to me anymore. You'll have to work that out with Dana. She won't take my calls. Can you blame her? I hung up on him and poured myself a beer. Outside, I could see neighbors gathering on their front porches, probably discussing the news story and speculating about what would happen next. The fourth call came an hour later from a number I didn't recognize. Mr. Barnes? This is Detective Sarah Chen with the Lakeview Police Department. We'd like to speak with you about Miranda Walsh. What about her? We're investigating possible fraud charges based on the information in tonight's news story. We understand you have documentation related to her previous criminal activity. I do. Would you be willing to come in and make a formal statement? Absolutely. The next morning, I spent 3 hours at the police station, walking detectives, through everything I knew about Miranda's operation. They were particularly interested in the embezzlement from my business and the fake investment schemes that had bilked money from local residents. This is going to be a complex case, Detective Chen said, but based on what you've shown us, I think we have enough to file charges. What kind of charges? Fraud, embezzlement, conspiracy, maybe more depending on what else we find. When I got home, Dana was waiting for me in the kitchen. She'd been staying at a hotel since the news story aired, giving us both space to process everything that had happened. How did it go with the police? They're going to file charges. Miranda's in serious trouble. Good. She deserves whatever she gets. We sat across from each other at the kitchen table, the same table where we'd shared thousands of meals over 18 years of marriage. It felt strange and familiar at the same time. Jake, I need to ask you something. Okay. Do you think there's any chance we can save our marriage? I looked at my wife, really looked at her, for the first time in months. The cold, professional mask was gone, replaced by genuine remorse and vulnerability. I don't know, I said honestly. You didn't just have an affair, Dana. You let someone else turn you into a weapon against me. You involved our daughter in your lies. You humiliated me in front of the entire town. I know, and I'll spend the rest of my life trying to make up for that. Making up for it isn't the same as fixing it. Then what would it take to fix it? I thought about that question for a long time. What would it take for me to trust Dana again? What would it take for us to rebuild something that had been so thoroughly destroyed? It would take time, I said finally. A lot of time. And it would take you proving that you're willing to fight for us the same way you fought against us. What does that mean? It means no more secrets, no more lies, no more letting other people make decisions about our marriage. I can do that. It means counseling. Real counseling, not just going through the motions. Okay. And it means accepting that I may never be able to forget what happened, even if I can forgive it. Dana reached across the table and took my hand. I understand. Do you? Because this isn't going to be easy. People in this town are going to be talking about us for years. Every time we go out in public, someone's going to remember the affair, the news story, all of it. I don't care about other people. You used to. I used to care about a lot of things that don't matter. The only thing that matters now is whether we can find our way back to each other. I squeezed her hand and felt something I hadn't felt in months, a tiny spark of hope. Maybe we can, I said, but it's going to take work. I'm ready to work. 3 months later, Miranda Walsh was arrested in Miami and extradited back to Lakeview to face a dozen felony charges. The local newspaper ran her mugshot on the front page, and the story made national news as an example of how social media and small-town gossip could be weaponized for personal revenge. Troy Brennan's car dealership went out of business after customers started avoiding him in droves. He eventually moved to another state, but not before making a public apology that was broadcast on local television. It wasn't enough to save his reputation, but it was something. Dana and I started couples counseling with Dr. Rebecca Martinez, a no-nonsense therapist who specialized in infidelity recovery. The sessions were brutal. 3 hours a week of dissecting every lie, every betrayal, every moment when our marriage had started to fall apart. Trust isn't something you can just decide to rebuild, Doctor. Martinez told us during one particularly difficult session. It's something you have to earn back, one day at a time, through consistent actions and absolute honesty. Dana took those words to heart. She quit her job at the law firm and started her own practice, specializing in helping victims of fraud and financial crimes. It was a way of making amends for her own victimization while building something meaningful from the wreckage of our old life. I threw myself into expanding my electrical business, taking on bigger commercial projects and hiring more workers. Success was the best revenge, and I wanted everyone in Lakeview to see that Jake Barnes was not a man to be underestimated. Kayla struggled the most with the aftermath. She'd lost her role as the family's designated rebel and had to figure out who she was when her parents weren't at war with each other. But slowly, painfully, we started to rebuild our relationship too. I'm sorry I called you a loser, she said one evening while we were working on her college applications. You were protecting your mother. I understand that. I was being a bastard. You were being 17. There's a difference. Do you think you and Mom are going to make it? I think we're going to try. That's all anyone can do. The hardest part was learning to live with the knowledge that our marriage had been destroyed by someone we'd trusted. Miranda had been at our wedding, had been Kayla's godmother, had been a part of our family for 15 years. The betrayal went deeper than adultery. It was a violation of everything we'd thought we knew about friendship and loyalty. But there was also something liberating about finally understanding what had happened to us. For months, I'd blamed myself for not being the husband Dana needed, for not seeing the signs of her unhappiness. Learning that her unhappiness had been manufactured by someone else didn't excuse the affair, but it did explain it. I keep thinking about all the things Miranda said to me, Dana told me during one of our evening walks around the neighborhood. All the ways she convinced me that you didn't love me anymore, that our marriage was holding me back. She was good at finding people's insecurities and exploiting them. But I let her. I wanted to believe that my problems were someone else's fault. We all want to believe that sometimes. Do you think you'll ever be able to trust me again? It was a question she asked me regularly, and I always gave her the same answer. I'm trying. And I was. Trust was like rewiring a house. You had to tear out all the old connections and start fresh, one circuit at a time. Some days were better than others. Some days I could look at Dana and see the woman I'd fallen in love with in college. Other days I could only see the stranger who'd betrayed me with a car salesman. But we kept working at it. 6 months after the news story aired, I ran into Tom Bradley at the grocery store. He'd won a regional journalism award for his investigation into Miranda's crimes, and he was moving to a bigger market in Chicago. "I wanted to thank you," he said. "That story changed my career. Glad I could help. How are things with you and your wife?" "Getting better, slowly." "That's good to hear. You know, I've covered a lot of stories about infidelity and betrayal, but I've never seen anything as calculated as what Miranda Walsh did to your family. She was a special kind of evil. The good news is she's going to prison for a long time. The bad news is she's probably not the only one out there doing this kind of thing." "What do you mean?" "Social media has made it easier than ever to manipulate people's relationships. All you need is access to someone's phone, a little creativity, and a lot of patience. I think we're going to see more cases like yours in the future." It was a sobering thought. How many marriages were being destroyed by people with hidden agendas? How many families were being torn apart by manufactured drama and artificial conflicts? But that wasn't my problem to solve. My problem was simpler and more personal, figuring out how to rebuild a life that had been blown apart by lies and betrayal. 1 year after the affair was exposed, Dana and I renewed our wedding vows in a small ceremony at Big Mike's boxing gym. It wasn't romantic or traditional, but it was honest, an acknowledgement that we were choosing each other again, despite everything that had happened. Kayla was our maid of honor, and she cried through the entire ceremony. Big Mike walked Dana down the aisle, since her father had disowned her after the scandal broke. My crew from the electrical business served as groomsmen, and Smokey the bartender provided the music on an old boombox. "Do you, Dana, take Jake to be your husband, knowing that trust is something you'll have to earn back every single day for the rest of your life?" Dr. Martinez asked, serving as our officiant. "I do." "Do you, Jake, take Dana to be your wife, knowing that forgiveness is something you'll have to choose again and again, even when it's hard?" "I do." We kissed, and everyone cheered, and for a moment it felt like we might actually make it. Later that night, as we were cleaning up the gym, Dana found me sitting alone on the bleachers, looking at the photos from our original wedding 18 years earlier. "Regrets?" she asked, just thinking about how different everything is now. Different bad or different good? Different real. We can't pretend anymore that love is enough to keep a marriage together. We have to actually work at it. Are you okay with that? I looked at my wife, older now, scarred by our shared trauma, but somehow more beautiful than she'd been at 23 when we'd first promised to love each other forever. "Yeah," I said. "I think I am." Epilogue. 2 years later, Miranda Walsh was sentenced to 12 years in federal prison for fraud, embezzlement, and conspiracy. She never apologized to any of her victims, maintaining until the end that she'd been the real victim of a vindictive ex-employer and a corrupt justice system. Troy Brennan moved to Nevada and got a job selling insurance. According to mutual friends, he'd given up on dating and was focusing on rebuilding his life. I felt sorry for him sometimes. He'd been a pawn in Miranda's game, just like the rest of us. Dana's law practice thrived, and she became something of a local celebrity for her work helping fraud victims recover their money. She was interviewed on several news programs and even wrote an article for a national magazine about how to recognize and avoid manipulation in personal relationships. My electrical business expanded to 3 crews, and I was bidding on projects as far away as Chicago. Success really was the best revenge. Every new contract, every satisfied customer, every dollar in the bank was proof that Jake Barnes was nobody's victim. Kayla graduated high school with honors and got accepted to Northwestern University, where she planned to study journalism. She said she wanted to help people tell their stories the way Tom Bradley had helped us tell ours. As for Dana and me, we were still married, still working at it, still taking it one day at a time. Some days were easier than others. Some days I looked at her and felt nothing but love. Other days I remembered the betrayal and had to consciously choose forgiveness all over again. But we'd learned something important. Marriage isn't a fairy tale with a happy ending. It's a daily decision to keep choosing each other, even when it's hard, even when it hurts, even when other people try to tear you apart. And sometimes, if you're lucky and you work hard enough, that's enough. On a warm Saturday morning in May, exactly 2 years after the affair was exposed, I was working in the garage when Dana appeared in the doorway with 2 cups of coffee. "Thought you might want a break," she said. I wiped my hands on a rag and accepted the coffee gratefully. "Thanks." We stood there in comfortable silence, watching the neighborhood come to life around us. Mrs. Hargrove was working in her garden, probably gathering intelligence for her next round of gossip. The Miller kids were riding their bikes in the street, their parents watching from the front porch. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if Miranda hadn't interfered?" Dana asked. "Sometimes, but I try not to dwell on it." "Do you think we would have made it?" "I think we would have been okay. Not great, maybe, but okay." And now, I looked at my wife, really looked at her, and saw something I hadn't seen in years. Contentment. Not the desperate happiness of newlyweds or the grim determination of people trying to save a failing marriage, but the quiet satisfaction of 2 people who'd been through hell together and come out the other side. "No, now I think we're better than okay." She smiled and leaned against my shoulder. "I love you, Jake Barnes. I love you too, Dana Barnes." And for the first time in years, I meant it completely.